Well, hello, Logic class. I pray that you guys are all doing okay. We're in the midst of the COVID crisis, and so we're all trying to be careful about social distancing and all of that, and which brings us to this new endeavor, something new for our class, and definitely a new thing for me. That's recording lectures like these. So I hope that this goes okay. Give me some feedback. Let me know if there needs to be anything improved, and I will do my very best to provide answers or to any questions you might have. You can send me an email as normal. The logistics for class are going to be very similar. You'll watch this lecture instead of being in class with me tomorrow. And then you'll complete assignments as assigned in iGrade. I'll continue to upload the answers to homework assignments, so you have all of those to check your answers as you go along. And then you'll be provided with quizzes and tests over iGrade as well. Whenever you complete those, you can scan them or take pictures of them and send me those answers, and I will grade your work from that. So that's how we're going to go forward. I'll send an email to your parents out tonight. We'll give you some further clarifications on all of this. So hopefully you guys will all be on the same page, but please do reach out to me or to the school if you have further questions. All right, so we're in this lecture, we're going to be looking at lessons 30 and 31. We'll be talking about enthymemes first of all, and then we'll move on to talking about hypothetical syllogisms. So lesson 30, enthymemes. So what is an enthymeme? An enthymeme is an argument in which a statement is unstated or assumed. Specifically, it's a syllogism with one assumed statement. So these are going to be syllogisms like what you're used to looking at with me. We've already learned how to translate ordinary language into standard form syllogisms. But now we're going to be looking at situations in which there's at least one of the three statements that's left out. It's assumed. And it's really an incredible thing, the way that God designed our minds and our ability to use reason within our brains, because you pick up on these even before knowing what an enthymeme was, which we're talking about now. You already engage in these, you make use of them, and you can translate them just inherently. We'll look at probably my favorite example of this. It's a favorite example because maybe it's so cutting and hard to deal with. And that's this one, example number 1. Someone comes up to you and says, "You're not invited to the party. Only cool people are invited." Now, this is a syllogism. There's actually 3 statements here, but one of the statements is left out. But that left out statement, I'm sure, isn't wasted on you. You know exactly what the implied statement is. This very snarky comment is very clear. The thing that's been left out is what? What is it that's not stated here? That you are not one of those cool people, right? You get the bad news of not only learning that you're not invited to the party, which might make you already sad, but you now realize that since it's only cool people that were invited and you were not invited, the reason must be because you are not cool. So it kind of looks like this. We can locate the conclusion in an enthymeme like this first by looking at the key words. Remember that word because here becomes that sort of thing. Because tells you a reason. It's telling you that there's a reason coming after it, which tells you that this, the only cool people are invited part, must be one of the premises. The thing that comes before the because must be the conclusion. And the conclusion is that you have not been invited to the party. Now remember, we learned how to translate these into standard form, where we have to use all, no, some, or some are not. In this case, we wouldn't say you, remember we use all or no, so we wouldn't say, well, we could say either no, you are invited to the party, or all you are not invited to the party, or an uninvited person. So here we're going to say no, you are invited persons. No, you are invited persons. Again, I know that sounds a little bit weird, but this is the way we write it in standard form, so that way we can do our normal test for validity. So we locate the conclusion. No, you are an invited person. Second, we consider the other statement and put it into standard form. So the other statement here is only cool people are invited. So only cool people are invited could be translated, all invited guests are cool people. All invited people are cool people. This is the major term, so it must be the major premise. Remember, you find the major term by looking at the second term, the predicate part of the conclusion, which has invited persons. So here we see invited persons. So since we see invited persons in this premise, we know that this premise must be the major premise because it has the major term, which means in a standard form syllogism, it goes in the first spot. The missing premise must contain the terms used here once. And so we assume that the person who's arguing argues validly, and so we will show that this way. We're going to put all invited persons are cool people, and the no, you are invited persons is our conclusion. Now, note, the thing that's implied, the thing that we all got right off the bat is, I'm not a cool person. No, you are cool people. Notice this is the minor premise because it has the minor term in it. And then cool people, remember, it would be the middle term that's being found here. So a syllogism is this kind of thing. You have an implied statement. Now, it could be the conclusion, it could be the major premise, or it could be the minor premise. It could be any one of those. And it just changes from example to example. So let's look at some more examples together. So our second example is this. It comes right out of the Bible. Matthew 27:4. I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood. I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood. Here is a statement from Judas Iscariot, right? I have betrayed innocent blood. And notice he says, I have sinned. Now, again, we're going to first locate the conclusion. And this word for helps us identify it, right? It's giving us an indication that the thing that comes before it must be the conclusion. And the thing that comes after it must be one of the reasons, which makes this one of the premises. So the conclusion has to be, I have sinned. Remember, we have to translate this to standard form. So we'll write, all I am a sinner. And then we consider the other statement and put it in standard form. So I have betrayed innocent blood must become all I am an innocent blood betrayer. All right. Now, we look again at the conclusion. Notice here, sinner would be the major term. I would be the minor term. Note here, in this premise, we have the I, which means that this must be the minor premise, which means it happens second when we write it in the syllogism, and the conclusion always happens last. So this is a minor term, so it's a minor premise. The missing premise must contain the terms used only once. So we've used I already in both of these. We've only used sinner once, and we've only used innocent blood betrayer once. So those are the two words that are going to go into our major premise. And so I'll put them all up here. Here is the conclusion that we were given, all I am a sinner. We knew that the second one must be the minor premise, so it goes second in order. So all I am an innocent blood betrayer. And then all we have to do on the first statement is we write all here, because it fits with the standard form here for a valid syllogism. And then we're using this word innocent blood betrayers and sinners. And in this case, it really, the point that's being made is that everyone who betrays innocent blood is a sinner. And so this writing it this way makes it a valid syllogism, and we've discovered even the implied premise. Well, example 3. Another verse from Scripture, Matthew 10:40. He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives the one who sent me. Now, if we're looking here for a conclusion, notice that we're looking for words like consequently, therefore, thus, for, because, that kind of thing. But instead, what we have is we just have a conjunction. We just have and, which should probably indicate something to you, right? We're not seeing a word that would normally indicate a conclusion or a premise, but just the word and, which is just linking two sentences together. This should indicate to you that these things both must be of the same type of thing. And since in a syllogism you can't have two conclusions, they both must be premises. So in this case, the conclusion is the assumed part. The conclusion is what we're going to discover. So now we're going to consider the statements and put them in standard form. So here we just take the second statement. All me receivers. Again, this is like weird language, but this is how we do it. All me receivers are one who sent me receivers. That comes from this. All he who receives me receives the one who sent me. So all the ones receiving me are ones receiving he who sent me. And then the first statement would be, all you receivers are me receivers. He who receives you receives me. All you receivers are me receivers. And then we just look here and we notice that this must be the middle term, me receivers, because it's in both of these. And so our conclusion has to have one who sent me, receivers, and you, receivers. So those two words must be in our conclusion. And then notice that in the second premises, this must be the major term here at the top, because it's the first one. And then this one must be the minor term, because it's the second one. So all me receivers are one who sent me receivers. All you receivers are me receivers. And so now, therefore, in the conclusion, we already have used this guy twice. That's the middle term, so we're done with him. The one who sent me must go here because it's the major term, so it goes second. And then this one must go first as the minor term. So it's you receivers are one who sent me receivers. All you receivers are one who sent me receivers. And we're done. Example 4. Now, this one's fun because I'm including this one in the next one because I was just preaching this last Sunday. By the way, it got posted to our website at sojournbaptist.org. It's also on YouTube. If you look up Sojourn Baptist Church, I think you might be able to find our YouTube channel now. It's the only video that's posted there. Our church now has been, launched into this new century, being forced by not being able to get together. So we purchased some video recording equipment, and I actually walked through this enthymeme situation in the middle of my sermon. If you want to listen to it, you are certainly welcome to. You can find it on YouTube. I might put a link at the bottom of this description to that video as well if you want to go and listen to my sermon on this matter. But I'll show you this playing out from a passage I was looking at this past week. So 1 Corinthians 6:13 says, "Food is for the stomach, and stomach is for food, but God will do away with both of them." So the first thing I have to do, again, is to locate the conclusion. In this case, it's something along the lines of this: all stomach desires are permissible. This little saying, food is for the stomach and stomach is for food, was a kind of a cliched maxim that was being utilized to say, hey, if it's food's made for the stomach and stomach is made to digest food, so therefore anything that your stomach desires is something it's permissible for you to eat. Then we consider the other statement and put them in categorical form, and that's this: all stomach desires will be destroyed. Note here it says God will do away with both of them. What he means by both of them is both the stomach and food. Both stomach and food will be destroyed. They'll be done away with. So all stomach desires will be destroyed. So then this just leaves us with, well, what is the enthymeme? What's the implied part of this? Well, stomach desires has already been used twice. You notice this must be the minor term, which makes this one the minor premise. It's the first thing makes it the minor term, so this must be the minor premise. So this will be positioned in the second place in our syllogism. So the words that are left are permissible and this destruction element. So all stomach desires are permissible. It would be like desires, right? If I was to write that fully, it should be all our permissible desires. And now we just start to write these out then. And notice here is the implied then premises. All destroyed things are permissible things. The destroyed things is the thing that was left out, and the permissible things is the thing that was only had it once. Both of those only had it once. So those are the two terms that must be used in our implied premise. All destroyed things are permissible things. So this is kind of the way this logic works. Food is for the stomach, stomach is for food. God will do away with them both. The premise that's linking those things together is destroyed things are permissible things. If it's something that's going to be destroyed, then we're okay to engage in it and to enjoy it. At least that's the way that this argument was going. And it seems that Paul was generally okay with that. What he's not okay with was what they were utilizing this form of logical reasoning to defend. As a matter of fact, this turns out to be a valid form of reasoning. And if the two premises, therefore, are true, then the conclusion must be true. But the problem is that Corinth was trying to apply this to another situation altogether. Example 5. Here's the rest of that verse into the next verse. It actually goes into verse 14 as well. Yet the body is not for immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord is for the body. Now God has not only raised the Lord, but will also raise us up through his power. Now, first we're going to locate the conclusion here, and it's this: all bodies are the Lord's things. The Lord has possession of the body. Note here, the body's for the Lord, and the Lord is for the body. I'm sorry, I think I left out the body here, but the body is for the Lord, and the Lord is for the body. Or I guess it's implied from the previous statement. Yet the body is not for immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord is for the body. So the conclusion is all bodies are the Lord's. The premise that we're provided with is all bodies will be resurrected. Note here, God has not only raised up the Lord, but will also raise us up through his power. So Paul is arguing that the body is for the Lord. And how can he prove that? Well, because all bodies will be resurrected. Now, there has to be a statement that's linking those things together. This is an enthymeme once again. There's an implied statement. So we're looking here. Bodies, notice, is used in both of these already. So what we're going to be linking together is the Lord's things and resurrected things. So it needs to be something like this. All resurrected things are the Lord's things. So all resurrected things are the Lord's things. All bodies will be resurrected. Therefore, all bodies are the Lord's. See, what Paul's doing here is he's saying, yeah, food and stomach things, you can choose whatever you want. It doesn't make a big deal because they're all going to be eliminated. They'll be destroyed. But the reason why you can't then apply that to our bodies is because our bodies will be resurrected. The Lord not only died to save our souls, but also to give us new resurrected bodies one day, which means life in our bodies has implication, and God cares about those things. He has given us directives for those things. And in the particular case in 1 Corinthians 6, he's talking about sexual purity. He's saying the body's not for immorality, but for purity. And the body is not something I can just choose to do whatever I want with because it's not my own. I've been bought with a price, and it will be resurrected one day. So he's using the basis of the resurrection as proof to say the way we live our lives presently matters to the Lord. It makes a difference. All right, well, this brings us to lesson 31, and we'll be talking about hypothetical syllogisms for just a few moments. As mentioned in a previous lesson, hypothetical syllogisms are statements which use if-then form. So if something, then this. They can be translated into universal categorical statements, but hypothetical syllogisms can also be examined in a manner different from categorical syllogisms, as I'll show you in a moment. First, let's consider pure hypothetical syllogisms. They look like this. If P, then Q. If Q, then R. Therefore, if P, then R. You follow the logic here? If this first thing happens, then a second thing happens. And if I'm told then if a second thing happens, a third thing happens, then that really just means if the first thing happens, the third thing happens. Note, if P, then Q. If Q, then R. Then if P, then R. Because if P happens, which necessitates Q occurring, and then when Q occurs, R happens, that means whenever P happens, we can make a direct line to R. R is going to take place. So it can be written like this. This is using logical operators. This horseshoe-looking thing looks like a U that's been bent over to the left, or like leaned over, fallen over to the left. This P, if P, it's translated if P, then Q. So this operator means if, then. So we would say if P, then Q. And then if Q, then R. Therefore, remember these the dots in the triangle form here is therefore. If P, then R. So note, this is just makes this notation a lot quicker than having to write the if-thens and every single one of those. Now, what this translates into is an AAA1 syllogism, which is valid. So here's an example of some words provided for those variables. If I study, then I will get good grades. And if I get good grades, then my parents will be pleased. So can you connect this together then? If I study, I get good grades. If I get good grades, my parents will be pleased. Therefore, if I study, my parents will be pleased. Very good. If I study, then my parents will be pleased. So that's how this works. Now, the categorical statement before the if is called the antecedent, abbreviated P, while the statement after the then is called the consequent, which is abbreviated Q in most cases. So if we have P, then Q, if we have a symbol like this, P, and then again, it looks like a horseshoe on its side, Q, we're saying if P, then Q. This P is called the antecedent. It comes before, and the consequent comes as a result of the antecedent. So that's the Q here. So the P is the antecedent, the Q is the consequent. Now, pure hypothetical syllogism can also be invalid. Some syllogisms combine hypothetical and categorical statements, and these are called mixed hypothetical syllogisms. And that's what I'm going to show you in the next slide. So there are two valid forms of mixed hypothetical syllogisms. The first is called modus ponens. If P, then Q. P, therefore Q. So if P, then Q. P, therefore Q. So if I make a statement where I say something like, if I study, then I'll get good grades. And then I take that first thing, the antecedent, and I say, I study. So what's the conclusion? Therefore, I'll get good grades. That's called a modus ponens argument. It's set up with, it's a mixed sort of hypothetical syllogism because it starts with a hypothetical, but then it goes from that into statements. So if I study, then I'll get good grades. I study, therefore I get good grades. Another example, if something has a complex design, then it has a designer. Living cells have a complex design, therefore living cells have a designer. Notice how these sorts of arguments go. And these are arguments that we utilize and everyone utilizes often. Okay, so the second valid form of mixed hypothetical syllogism is called the modus tollens. Now, modus ponens, remember, was if P then Q, P therefore Q. The modus tollens is slightly different. If P then Q, not Q, therefore not P. Now, the tilde there means not. So that little symbol, that little squiggly, means not. Now, if I study, let's look at it with an example in there. If I study, then I'll get good grades. I did not get good grades, therefore, I did not study. And maybe your parents have used this one with you before. They know that when you actually apply yourself, when you actually study, that you get good grades. And so if you didn't get good grades, you must not have studied. Now, you might take exception with this and say, well, sometimes I do study and I don't get good grades. But then that would mean that you're taking issue with this first statement. But if this first statement is true, which we're assuming the hypothetical part of this is true, if I study, then I get good grades, then the rest of this does follow. If it is true when you study, you get good grades. If you don't get good grades, you must not have studied. Okay? Now, another example. If the school is classical, then it teaches logic. Logic is not taught at that school, therefore, the school must not be classical. Right? So this is how modus tollens arguments work. It involves denying the consequent, which then means that the antecedent also must be denied. Now, there are two invalid forms of mixed hypothetical syllogism, and you'll see in both these cases we're just flipping it in the wrong way. So first of all is the problem of affirming the consequent. If P then Q, Q therefore P. Now, this is a problem. This is not valid reasoning. And let me show you through a couple of examples. Let's use this example again. If I study, then I'll get good grades. I got good grades. Therefore, I studied. Now, this is invalid. Think about this for just a moment. Can you think of some other ways whereby you might have gotten good grades and yet not studied? Note, this is just saying if I study, I'll get good grades. But it's not saying that if I get good grades, it therefore proves that I studied. You could have just been lucky, or you could have cheated. There could have been another way in which you got the good grades. It doesn't necessarily mean that you studied. If you were a gorilla, then you'd have 2 legs. You have 2 legs. Does that make you therefore a gorilla? Obviously not. Right? This example becomes immediately apparent to our minds. We think, okay, well, if you're a gorilla, you have 2 legs. Yeah, gorillas have 2 legs. But that doesn't mean then if I have 2 legs, I must be a gorilla. Note, this is a problem that a lot of evolutionary science gets into. They make these sorts of correlations. They're like, well, look at the genetic code. I mean, the code of the gorilla is similar to man, so that means man must be a gorilla. That kind of argumentation is invalid. Now, there's another form of invalid mixed hypothetical syllogism, and it's called denying the antecedent. And it looks like this. If P, then Q, not P, therefore not Q. Let's look at a couple examples. If I study, then I will get good grades. I did not study. Therefore, I will not get good grades. Now, note again, this does not necessarily carry or follow. Why? Because you may not study and just get lucky. It's possible, especially if it was a multiple choice test or something, you just happen to pick the right answers, right? Or you cheated or whatever the case may be. There could be another reason whereby even though you didn't study, you might just get good grades anyway, right? So the statement, if I study, then I'll get good grades, is not talking about the situation, well, if you don't study, then you won't get good grades. It's not denying that reality. Or if you were a gorilla, then you'd have 2 legs. You are not a gorilla, therefore you do not have 2 legs. Can you see how that line of reasoning does not follow? This is called denying the antecedent, and it is an invalid form of reasoning. Well, that does it for this week. I'm including here at the end a riddle for you guys to check out. So if you want to click on the link that I'm including here in this slide, if you click on that, you can go ahead and check out this riddle, see if you can figure out for yourself. Make sure you do pause that video during those 3 seconds that it gives you. Just pause it there and try to figure it out on your own before you look at the solution as you try to keep working through some puzzles together in class. But I hope you guys are all doing well. I'm praying for you. Let me know if you guys need anything at all. You can send me an email with questions, and we can talk some more further. Thank you guys so much. God bless you.